Today I'm going to be reviewing my Alex Ross books, and though these are technically not art instruction books, they can be used as inspiration and also as guidance for lots of stuff to do with painting and drawing and drafting. So the 4 books I have here are Marvels, which is a collection of some of the Marvel comic books that Alex Ross has drawn. And you can see that apart from reading a lot of really fun stories in here, you can check out the art, his layout, how he chooses to solve problems with angles and features, and it'll really help you learn a lot. And he draws all sorts of people, close-ups and crowded scenes and everything. So at the end he does show thumbnails and sketches and a little bit of his process to make crib sheets for these different characters. And again, it's very instructive if you're trying to figure out how to do drafting and thumbnails and such, and also get a good handle on maybe how somebody works from thumbnails to more refined sketches to a final piece. Alex Ross is one of the best comic book illustrators out there right now and for many years, so I've been a big fan of his since I was a little kid. And here's a second book of his, and this is a collection of these stories that he illustrated and Paul Dini wrote. It's like this great grand comic book style and size for Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman. I found these very, very inspiring and interesting as a kid because I was really taken by the fact that these were comic book superheroes who I usually saw in cartoon form, and here they were being drawn very realistically, and it was very, very exciting to see them as more or less real people because his gouache painting is a more realistic take on watercolor. You get a really cool poster that folds out to be gigantic, actually. It's not going to fit on the camera screen, but it's like this 4-page poster. And again, a lot of great art to be inspired from and to look at. And most of these are finished pieces, but again, at the end he's got a little section called Project Genesis where you get to see his thumbnails and his sketches and his finished pieces, and you can see how he takes a thumbnail and turns it into a refined sketch and uses a photo reference to help him with that, and then after that he takes that and turns it into a final piece inside of the comic book. And so it's exciting to see how he does that. Again, seeing photo reference and then seeing how he's done the final piece. And he does that for a handful of different pieces that he's showing here. So you can see again, thumbnail, sketch, photo reference, final painting. It also shows you how he uses models or maquettes and all busts and all this kind of stuff to help him. So this is a nice section to look at. This is my favorite part actually when I was a kid because I really loved the comic books, but I loved even more learning how I could perhaps do this myself. And if you're looking for the gouache process, it's not in these 2 books, so you're not going to find it in The World's Greatest Superheroes or in Marvels, but he does show more sketches and more stuff in these last 2 big books that I have, and I will share those as well. So this one is called The Dynamite Art of Alex Ross, and this is basically just a giant folio of a lot of the covers that he's done. And apart from showing a lot of his great work close up and in great color, so you can use it as very, very close-up instruction to see maybe how he's layered, because the good thing about watercolor and gouache is that you can actually make out how something is painted and emulate it in a way that you can't for mediums that are more opaque or also just more elusive, and trying to figure out what was going on there if it's a digital painting or something, because you don't know. Maybe somebody just used a photo and basically collaged it for Photoshop, or maybe they sat there and painted it. You have no idea what the process is, but with something like this you can really sort of see sketches and the final art and try to make out, even if you haven't seen all the steps, exactly what's going on. And it's also just a great book for a rainy day to look through all these amazing covers, angles, colors, and again see how he sort of looks at all of these problems and these assignments and how he deals with them. So this is a great collection of covers. The gouache process that he does in detail is not shown here. You can see sketches and you can see thumbnails and you can see some final pieces and you can see marker art, but I don't think there is any finished step-by-step gouache process here. That happens in Mythology. That's the last book, and that's this one right here. And I like this book better because probably it shows a lot of the DC Comics art, so I like it better than the Dynamite art of Alex Ross. So if you had to get one of them, I would choose this one. So he goes through an amazing amount of artwork that he's done for DC throughout this entire book. And you can again see his sketching process and how he looks at photo reference and angles and how he's maybe reinterpreted Golden Age covers and all sorts of stuff, all sorts of really cool things that he's done here. And it's just a very, very interesting read and also great inspiration art-wise if you are a watercolor or gouache painter. And if you are interested in his actual step-by-step technique, probably the gem of this book is that near the end you have a section that's called The Process, and he starts with showing you how he has a thumbnail, another idea for a thumbnail, and a more fleshed out thumbnail, and then he takes photo reference for Superman, because this is the cover that he's working on, and he shows how he lights it and how he shoots it, and then he shows how he starts drawing from these photo references, and then he shows how he starts layering in the gouache. Now, he does go into black and white before he does color, so this is an underpainting, and this is called Grisaille. I've mentioned that before in other videos, so that's what he's doing here. He's doing this as a underpainting, and that is going to be useful to him when he goes and layers later because it's given him a tonal value map to show where his darkest darks are, where his medium values are, where his light values are. So you can see how he does that on these few pages, and then he starts adding the color. And the important thing to note here is if you study this carefully, you can really figure out exactly how he does this. And so for example, you can see the final piece here, and you can see, for example, this part of his shoulder is a very dark blue and it fades into black, that part of his chest. So if you go back to the black and white section, sure enough, when he's painting it, he has painted that part of the shoulder and the chest basically almost black with just the black and white paint. So what that means is when you go back and layer the blue on it, the blue is going to show up in the places where it's a little bit lighter, but otherwise it's going to help the blue fade to black. And he does the exact same thing with all the other colors. And where it's very light, he doesn't add very much black or as an underpainting. So for example, the flesh that he has on his neck, where there are some highlights here, in the tonal underwash you can see that it's left mostly white, and then when you go and see the final painting, then that's where the highlights are, and of course that's where it's still mostly white with the exception of a little bit of flesh tone. So the Grisaille underpainting does correspond to where you add more or less color in the final piece. Where there's more shadows and more dark color, you will have more gray and black going on, and where you have a very light highlight and less color, you will have a much lighter underpainting and gray going on. Okay, so again, I've shown that in some of my other videos. I will continue to show it because it's a little bit of a complicated process, but you can see how a master of the medium, Alex Ross, does it in this book here. And you can also see more of his photo references, angles, his ideas, and so this is a really invaluable book. Throughout my entire childhood, my entire teens, all I did was paint comic books and comic book characters for fun and just do that all the time, and I think that's really how I learned how to draw, because comic book painting and comic book drafting is very, very top-notch, and it means that you have to be able to draw and paint very well. So it's just a great medium to learn from, and if you're going to learn how to paint from anybody, you want to do stuff that's more realistic, especially in gouache, then Alex Ross is your man. So these are the 4 books I've reviewed: Mythology, The Dynamite Art of Alex Ross, Marvels, and The World's Greatest Superheroes, and these are some of my favorite books on my bookshelf, and also great for just a rainy day read if you want to look at stuff that's beautiful with good stories, and I highly recommend them.